forecast, which might be very important for the climate services and work for agriculture and resilient infrastructure. So, Isadora, welcome.
So, hi everyone. Thank you very much for being here early in the morning, and after 2 days, this is the last one. So, it is true that the title was given by Francisco Doblas Reyes, and he was saying the challenges of probabilistic forecast. The truth is I'm a science communication expert. So, I don't want really in this festival and not an official congress to be too much serious about data. So I'm going to make it a bit more personal. I'm going to be a bit more into personal stories. So I'm going to tell you that Paula Newton knows I started 3.5 years ago. I started in climate services. So I was really a totally outsider to climate services. I didn't know about climate science. I was a biologist, PhD on that. And I had a very fresh look into what the climate services community was trying to do. And after 3.5 years, I'm not an outsider anymore, because I know many faces here, and we have been working together in a number of projects. So anyway, I still like to think that I can still see the climate services task as a bit as a more in the outside part, even if I'm part of the community. So this is how I see, this is how I saw climate services, this is how it is climate services right now. We all here, except those real users, we are in the climate services. Some of us, like science communication experts, social scientists, we are more like the hands of these men. We are trying to grab the users and try to not to get the fundamental climate science too far away from them. Some of you in climate services, you are more like the feet of these men. So you're really like trying to feed the ground in climate science so we don't overpromise or we don't say something that is not safe and sound science. But the point is that when we go into the challenges of communicating probabilistic predictions, we all agree, the hands and the feet, we agree that the problem is uncertainty. This is in the head of all the users and all the scientists. The problem is, as a science communication expert, I know that all of you, you have this uncertainty word in your head, but it means very different things for each of us in this room. So users don't think the same about uncertainty that climate scientists. And if you look into a nice definition of uncertainty from the climate science perspective, and I use Euporias, which was like, well, Chris Hewitt, a coordinator, Carlo Bontempo, they did a very nice effort trying to find a glossary that was useful for people to understand climate concepts. Uncertainty definition was the exact value for a given time is not predictable, but it does not usually imply lack of knowledge. This is a contradiction. I mean, what does it mean? It doesn't imply lack of knowledge. You don't know the exact value, so you have a lack of knowledge. Because as a user, as the rest of the world outside of the climate science community, uncertainty is a situation which involves imperfect or unknown information. And that's what any user will understand as uncertainty. It happens the same with another concept that I hate from climate science. It's a nightmare, which is reliability. But though, what does climate science scientists understand as reliability? The definition says that the probabilities issued for a specific event vary a proportion of times equal to the climatological frequency of the event. I can tell you that it took me more than 1 year to understand what were scientists trying to mean with this. I do understand now, but I still think like it's totally not intuitive definition, because the rest of the world, including the users, they think that reliable is something that can be trusted or believed because he or she or it in this case, works or behaves well in the way you expect. And is it it? It is not about quantification of reliability. It's not about which percentages of times are you right with your probabilistic forecast. It's about, do I trust or not your forecast? Do I trust your probabilities? This is what any user and all the world outside this climate services community understand as reliable. So the problem is uncertainty, but the challenge is not to answer uncertainty, or is a challenge for scientists to understand the observations uncertainty, the model uncertainty. For the rest of the community, the challenge is how to build trust into the climate models. It's how to build trust for those who have to use the climate information, to trust that that information can be useful and can make a difference into their decision-making days. So for today's talk, I will be using S2S4E project just to show examples, but what I'm going to tell works for all types of probabilistic predictions. It works for subseasonal, seasonal, decadal, or projections. It doesn't matter if it's about agriculture or energy, that I will be talking, or infrastructures. It's really general types of challenges that we have to keep in mind thinking on users. And one of them is that, well, okay, we are in climate services, and we talk about users constantly. I do talk about users. But users, the word user has a meaning behind. When we think about the users, we think that we are doing something that is important. And a user is waiting, like in a bus stop, for a service to come. And they will be very willing to go inside our bus. It's not like that. They are not users. They are decision makers. They have to make constant decisions for their business. And climate information, climate services are just a piece of information that they have to handle together with many other ones. The first day on insurance topics, there was also this comment. We have to deal with risks, political risks. We have to deal with economical and financial risks. We have to deal with technical day-to-day operations and feasibility options. And then beside that, users now start to understand that they might also add the climate information as another piece of information. So doing the challenge for communicating probabilistic predictions at any time scale is understanding which is this decision-making process. It's understanding exactly which type of climate information they need and in which format. It doesn't matter if you give the most wonderful prediction. If the format is not the right one, it doesn't fit the rest of the information they have to use, it will be useless. It won't get into the decision-making processes. The second thing is that we really need to understand typologies of the decision makers. So who is the user? And it seems obvious, but I mean, even myself, I keep forgetting about that. It's not the same having the CEO of a company in front of you that having a climate analyst. The amount of information they want to get, the type of information, and the time they have to make a decision is totally different. A CEO might have 5 minutes to assess if wants or not to do something with that information. And they have a very strategic perspective on a problem. A climate analyst is paid to handle as much information as possible. So if you just give to a climate analyst a yes, no climate services, go ahead or not, climate analysts won't use it. They won't trust you because they want to know which model, with which uncertainty, which whatever, everything. They want all the details. And you have to be sure that you provide the right service and the right level of information to the right typology of decision makers. The third part, and I must confess I keep on forgetting it, but I'm sure that Adrian Perels doesn't, is that we need to understand which are the motivations for these users. Why do they would like to use your climate service? And here it's when economy comes into action, when financial economy, it's important. Because users might want to use your climate services to improve their planning budget. And this means that they will probably be interested in a climate service that gives information every week or every month or, you know, these short-term timescales. They might be willing to reduce losses or costs. And this is where climate change adaptation comes into action, is where these users are interested in projections. They are interested in extremes. I want to avoid a disaster situation for my business or my country or my city. And there's a third part or interest or motivation, which is increase the revenues. It is, I don't think it is the most common one, but well, sometimes and every now and then there will be a company that wants to be disruptive in the market. And that particular user, is maybe we don't know that person yet, will want to just get this, take the risk, use climate service, and try to be better than the competitors. So depending on the motivations, the information and the climate information you have to provide them will change completely. They may want to have extremes, they might want to have sub-seasonal to seasonal predictions, like for the budgets, or they might want to have something different. Once you make this effort and you build trust, but really understanding who's the person at the other side of the line, then you really come into how you provide climate information. And here I'm going to be using S2S4E example, only because it's good to have something clear, something that is being done right now, but it works for any other project. It works for VISCA, it works for MedGold. Any other project on climate services could be providing a kind of an example. So the first thing to build trust in users is to understand, okay, how do they tell them that our probabilistic predictions are better than climatology? So the first thing is we have to spend time building trust. So we answer the question, or why should I use your predictions instead of climatology? Business as usual is comfortable. It's a matter of trust. We know with climate change that climatology is not working anymore, but it is not that. It is not a rational decision. It's also something emotional. It's something about being brave enough to push forward in your company or in your government. A change in the way you make decisions is a risk. It's a personal risk for the person pushing forward that forecast. If the next day after using that climate services, the first prediction is wrong, that has a strong personal problem for that person, and you cannot tell them, no, I mean, there was a 10% chance that this could happen. Well, the person doesn't want to take that risk. The user should use predictions instead of climatology. It's very important to talk about the concept of skill. Well, in S2S4E, we have been fighting with the concept of skill. Skill is not intuitive. Now, for me, I'm talking about skill, and it's the most natural concept for me right now. It wasn't 3 years ago. I really had problems to understand. So in S2S4E, we have been trying to give a twist to the words. So can we talk about skill with a different word? Can we talk about performance? Can we talk about quality? Can we talk in a language with a word that really makes user understand better what we mean with skill? Then skill, it goes, this is our PSS value. It's 0.16, but you cannot tell somebody you have 0.16 improvement that climatology. That's such a low value. Why should a user take an action out of 0.16? So we make the decision. It's not completely right, but we talk about percentages. Because percentages, 16% percentages, it's a common place for users. They do understand better, 16% better, that 0.16 better. Which is the other thing, that decision that we make in S2S4E is, for example, really providing them a text. And, you know, we were telling them how to interpret that value. 16% might seem low, but we know if it's low or not. So we can tell them, okay, this is fair enough, or this is very good, or something even simpler, like, well, with this skill, which is negative, use climatology. So don't even look anymore to my prediction today or in this place. My prediction is not good enough. Don't use my climate service. But imagine that we have a user that, okay, has been interacting with us and wants to use our climate services, and in their place of interest, there's a skill. They say, perfect, I'm going to use your climate service. Then the next problem is like, okay, which is the probability of, and I talk about energy, wind energy being above the average. And we, climate services community, we say, yeah, there's a 50% probability of being above the average. you know, it's larger probability than 30% on the average or 20% below the average. And then it's when a user looks at you and tells you, okay, so you're telling me that I have exactly the same probability of being over the average, over high winds than not having them, because I'm not going to make a decision out of that. And this links with Antonio Grasa's wonderful presentation yesterday in the afternoon. You know, you need a threshold of probability to trigger action. And it's, again, a matter of trust. Which is that magic number? I mean, Antonio Grasa said 75, and I open my notebook and say, 75 is good for Antonio Grasa and for wine sector. I have been asking for this probability of the energy users. I have been asking all users for this magic number. It's not easy. And it's, as Antonio was saying in the bus, going to the restaurant, it's a matter of psychology. It's not a matter of science. It's not a matter of numbers and probabilities. 60% probability is better than 50%. But should I take the risk of changing the way I make decisions for only 10% more of probability? Well, maybe not. Then in S2S4E, what we did, we knew about this, you know, for previous projects from Euporias, from some Copernicus contracts. So what we did in the tool that we will be launching, we will include this capacity, this option for the user, so they can really set their probability threshold. It is just empowering the user. We cannot make the decision of when or from which probability are you going to trust us. So I'm going to leave, you know, Antonio Grasa to put the probability for which they would make a decision. This changes, for example, in our tool, this changes the way it is visualized. So large balls, they are over the probability threshold of the user. And it's up to the user to decide that threshold. But once they decide, over the map, it will be easier to find out areas with large balls and areas that are really, just forget about them. And so it's about this. Climate services is about thinking on the user, thinking on the type of decision they have to make, and make it as simple as possible, their work. This tool, for example, is full and packed of information. And the point is, our target user, they are climate analysts. They really want a lot of information. But even wanted a lot of information, the first step into your climate service is really this first screening of what it is. I see something that calls my attention. Is my region having right now particularly highly wind speeds? Okay, then I will deep into the details and the predictions that you're giving me. And they will put their feet into the probabilistic predictions, and they will start learning more about what you are telling for the next weeks. So these are some of the things that we have to take into account. These are some of the challenges on how to put a climate service providing probabilistic predictions. And I'm sure we could have here somebody talking about the science part, but, well, today you had a science communication specialist, so this is what I'm interested in. As communication specialist, I also like a lot to hear people. So over these last 2 days, I've been hearing all of you, and I'm really glad to see a difference from 3.5 years ago and now. Now we really focus more on users. We focus a bit less into the practical aspects of the science. There are other places, other conferences to deep into that part. And over these days, I have taken many ideas. For example, Abdullah Sakali, I don't know if I see him around, yeah, just in the bottom of the room. He was saying in the interactive session for S2S4E that we really need to certificate the quality of data. I didn't even thought about it. I thought that the European Center is really high quality, and why should somebody don't care about it? Well, maybe not everybody knows what the European Center is. Maybe not everybody knows if they should trust a climate service, so it's good to have a stamp that says there is safe science, safe data behind this climate service, so you can go ahead into this. This is a challenge that we have to take into account too. There was Svetlana Niskevich, Natalia Odzernova also in the interactive session, and they were saying something like, well, that you need to create capacity. Don't take for granted that when you say 60% probability, somebody can understand that probability. And it was mind-blowing, and Antonio was also telling me that. We all assume that it's very easy to understand probabilities, but it might not be. The person making the decision might not be trained into understanding probabilities, might have a personal fear or can be personally scared from statistics, and even a simple concept might be seen as a barrier, like, no, I don't know about statistics, so I don't know about probabilities. We have to keep that into account because this is a challenge that we need to overcome to build trust. And the final one I really liked from Rasmus Lauritsen when we were in the Fortress, and he was saying, okay, yeah, one of the challenges would be that a user has a problem, writes her problem into Google, and Google, the first answer of Google, is providing the link for a climate service. That is really, well, I didn't even thought about that option, but I thought it's great. It is like that. This is our aim. I shouldn't expect somebody looking into Google S2S4E decision support tool. I mean, the person that makes this query in Google, they already know me. They can just pick up the phone and call me and call the team at BSC. The challenge is that somebody says, how do I find out the wind speed in my region? And Google tells them, oh, check this very nice climate service. So this is somehow the perspective in the long run. That's what I would like to see. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isadora, for a very inspiring presentation for today. I hope you have a lot of questions, but only one will be allowed, because we need to go. So you can grab Isadora in the coffee break and so continue to talking with you. So do you have any urgent questions? Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Isadora.
Sorry everyone for the interruption. Well, hello everyone firstly. Sorry for the interruption. We want to thank every one of you that we could participate in this great event. Thank you all of you. Thank you to all the people, to all the professors, to all the scientists. We were very, very honored to be here with you. Thank you so much. We want also to thank Crescendo School that gave us this opportunity to be here. Thank you so much.
Would you like to say something? Okay, thank you very much for being with us. I hope to meet you next time somewhere. And have a nice trip back.
Thank you very much as well. Goodbye. Thank you for coming. Okay, that's a tough act to follow. What was I going to say? It was your previous slide, so thank you very much. It was actually quite amusing sitting here listening to your comments about the Euporius efforts to try and improve the definitions and things, and it sounds like we may not have succeeded, but that's okay. The landscape moves on.
It was a first step. I use it a lot, that glossary,
exactly.
Even now. So.
That wasn't my comment, though. It's the first bullet point up here about the quality of the data. So it's also not just the data, it's the service. So there have been ongoing discussions for many, many years now. There's many of you know about the International Climate Services Partnership, the International Conference for Climate Services, and also the Global Framework for Climate Services. So we've been trying to think about addressing this issue of some sort of stamp of approval or kite mark or accreditation or quality, not just about the data, but about the service as well. So I think on the data side, I think there are quite a lot of quality standards already, and so the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, for example, does establish internationally through quite a long and painful process quality of climate data, observations, weather data, all of these sorts of things. But the service, the climate service, is a gap. And so I've been working with the WMO's Commission for Climatology to try and think about how we can address this. And the meeting was last April of this year, where I don't know who in the room was at the meeting, but it's a big international meeting, and I spent a lot of time making interventions like this to try and raise exactly this issue about quality. And I think I've made some success, and there have been some thoughts as well in the Climate Europe project about what we can do in Climate Europe to help move forward this issue of quality for climate services. I've had some discussions with the European Commission as well about this. So it's something we're going to think about in Climate Europe going forward. This community here, I'll be really pleased for them to be involved, and then also internationally through the WMO and their Commission for Climatology. But these things are surprisingly difficult to establish. We've been talking about it for a long time. Guy Brasseur, who many of you know, was very, very keen on this 7 or 8 years ago, and we're still talking about it. So I'm hoping we make success and progress. Thank you for raising it. But thank you for the rest of the talk. It was excellent. Thank you.
If I can add something, I really appreciate, and I know that probably you're going to be the right person pushing it forward. Once you make the whole titanic effort of getting that stamp, don't forget about communication people, because giving visibility to that stamp is as important as having the standards and having that stamp, because the user that is not from the climate services community needs to hear about that stamp outside our community. They have to be in agriculture conference and learn and have that marketing thing about this is the stamp that says this is a quality climate service. So you won't forget, because I will remember Paco, and Paco will be reminding you. But for all of you, don't forget, we live in a world of marketing, in a world of publicity. Publicity works. It has been working for decades. They know a lot about what they do. So just don't forget about having them into the equation, because good marketing makes a difference on somebody thinking that a service is good, independent on the quality of the science behind.
Thank you very much. And let's move further, and maybe the people can discuss some of your points in the session at Climate Services on Work. And we start with the agriculture. Yesterday we was in the winery, and now we continue with the agriculture. And I'm happy to introduce Maria Manjes from the Climate Service Germany, who will be moderate this session.
So hello everyone. If you look at the agenda, there has been some changes because one of our colleagues could not join us, another one is joining us. So we're going to have 5 people talking here, so I would like them all to come to the front. So we have here the chairs for you. We have Carmen Arguello from the FAO. We have Ludwig Liagre from the European Investment Bank. We have Maria Navarro from the project VISCA. We have Michele Bernardi from Agro-Impact, and we have Giannis Lemesios from the National Observatory of Athens. I'm missing Giannis?
That's the first one.
Sorry? Ah, okay, okay. So the idea of this session is, it's called storytelling. So the idea is that everyone is going to have 5 minutes to tell us their story. So it has to be just an impulse for the others to start a conversation. And I really would like you in the public to interact and make questions and put things in another way so that they will need to answer you. So the idea is to have a real interaction between what they are going to present us and what we don't understand or understand better. So, and I like that Isadora was just before us talking about communication and about the importance of really bringing things to the table as people need or as people understand them, because at the end of the day, this is the only kind of science that really reaches the users. And I read an article a long time ago that was saying that from the science that we do, only around 8 to 10% really reaches the market or reaches the users. So we really need to increase the percentage as far as we can. So now I would leave the floor to Ludwig.
Yes, thank you, Maria. Good morning, everyone.
And one question, 5 minutes are 5 minutes.
Yeah, of
okay?
course, of course. Even though Maria promised a hug if we go beyond 5 minutes.
I will hug everyone.
It's tempting. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some of the needs that EIB, the European Investment Bank, may have in terms of climate services, in particular for the time being for the forestry and agriculture sector, where we are quite engaged in many countries of the world, including in this area in the EU and Eastern Central European countries. We have a vision, we have an ambition, as my colleague Rasmus was telling us at the opening day, is to have a climate risk management system in place to screen all our projects, all our operations by 2020. This climate risk management system is so aimed at screening all the projects in the portfolio against climate risks. We are testing it right now. We hope to have it already operational very soon in the coming weeks and months to reach this target that by 2020 we have 100% climate screening of our project. So we look at climate risks all along the project cycle. We are looking at climate risks already in the identification phase, but also the appraisal stage until the project is approved and signed, and then further in the implementation and the monitoring evaluation. So climate services, you see they are needed all along the cycle. So we would need in the initiation and appraisal stage data, projections, thinking of the right adaptation options, and then in the implementation, we may have to correct some of these measures, to have adaptive and corrective adaptation measures in place, but also to have monitoring and evaluation of the impacts or remaining impacts of climate. So we have a very adaptable and adaptive system in place. So we are engaged in a number of operations already in those sectors. And I'll give you just a few examples. In Moldova, for example, we have a 120 million loan for the horticulture sector, which is extremely important for food security, which is directly benefiting more than 52,000 beneficiaries, smallholders, farmers. And there are a number of measures that we are already putting in place, including efficient irrigation to face water stress, but also anti-hail systems. But of course, this may not be enough, because maybe we have not been informed enough of all the climate risks and the magnitude of those risks, of those impacts. Also, we are still facing some challenges in terms of calibrating the right level of answers. Another project is in Turkey, for example, with a 120 million loan also for the forestry sector. It's a loan that is coming after two other loans that were provided in the past. And this project is aiming at both the adaptation of forests per se, but also at contributing to the adaptation of the landscape and the society through forest. So it's adaptation based on forest as well. And a number of benefits will be provided in terms of environmental and economic benefits. But many risks are there: forest fires, pest outbreaks, desertification and land degradation, you know, that we have to face potentially. Another interesting project is in Croatia, not far from here, with the Croatian Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is a financial intermediary in this case for us. So we are lending to this financial intermediary that will then lend again with smaller loans to a number of small companies, smallholders that will invest in sustainable agriculture, sustainable forestry, ecotourism, etc., all sorts of things that are directly contributing to maintenance and preservation of natural ecosystems, including forests. So, as you saw, we have a number of operations, and this is just a small sample. We have many more all around the world, and that means our portfolio is very much exposed to all sorts of climate risks. And this climate risk management system that is now being developed of course, it may not be perfect. Maybe the process is very good, but if we don't have the right data in the model, if we don't have the right tools, models to input the CRM system, maybe then the result may not be fully convenient. So we still have, we know, some improvement to deliver, and some of the key questions for that would be which are the key data sources, models, tools that we can input in this CRM system that are also relevant beyond for the agriculture and forestry sectors. As we know, these sectors are value chains, so depending on the types of stakeholders, the types of needs may vary as well. So we may have to ask this question, and of course for the financial institutions, we have specific needs. Another question would be on adaptation options. What kind of knowledge and know-how already exists that we could transfer to our project promoters, the final beneficiaries, but also us, that we can include in our practices early enough among our engineers and technicians' practices, the habits to identify early enough the right corrective and adaptation measures. And I will let you with that. You can see some of these questions. Maybe we can use them again at the end. Thank you. I hope I was not beyond 5 minutes.
Thank you. So thanks a lot, Ludwig. So the idea is to invite everyone after the others and let the questions for the end. So I will invite now Maria.
Yes. Thank you. So my storytelling will be about climate services applied on the wine sector, which is the VISCA project is about. So, why climate services are needed in winery? As we know, climate changes are affecting, in general, sectors of agriculture. In particular, for wine grapes, the harvesting temperatures are becoming too high, and this is affecting the quality of the wines. Also, not only high temperatures for harvesting, but extreme events are also affecting the quantity of grapes that may be harvested in the season. And these, of course, have impacts, important impacts in the European wine economy, which is traditionally in the southern European countries. Adaptation strategies have been traditionally focused on shifting or changing the crop varieties or the grape varieties, more resilient to climate change, or even changing the location for the production, changing it to higher latitudes. In VISCA's approach, on the other side, we aimed at using advanced agricultural techniques and climate models in order to move the vineyard's life cycle along the year. So we will make the plant adapted to the climate variations. And this has as an objective that the production can occur in an optimum harvesting zone according to requirements of the end users or wine producers that wish an optimum temperature for harvesting or that wish an optimum sugar concentration in the grapes. So how are we doing that? In VISCA we use the phenological models which are fed with seasonal forecasting to predict the best harvest dates. And this is going to be supported with adaptation strategies or like crop forcing and shoot trimming. So one of the requirements of the climate service, in our case, is validation of adaptation strategies in agriculture. The crop forcing is based basically in forcing the plant to restart its cycle later, so the harvesting can happen later when the temperature is cooler, in cooler months, or because August or beginning of September, the temperature has become to be too high for it. And this technique is going to be validated in Spain, where we have 7 hectares, devoted to it, and in Portugal, where we have 3 hectares for it.
Validation of the other technique is the technique shoot trimming, which is applied for rain-fed vineyards. This is vineyards who don't grow in such a dry climates like in Spain and Portugal. And basically it's useful to slow down the concentration of the sugar accumulation. So the end users can calculate or achieve an optimum alcohol concentration in the final product with this technique. Very important of requirement of a climate service in our area is the integration of data. We are integrated many data sources, beginning with end users requirements, soil characteristics, vineyards, properties, the modelings, all types of modelings, agriculture, climate, irrigation models, etc. And we are all integrated into a geospatial database, and all this information will be then shown and provided into a decision support system. So one of the most important requirements of the climate service when using the DSS is the feedback from the end users. Here we have the mock-up that we designed together with the end users. This belongs to the layer phenology data. Here the end users can monitor the phenological stages of the plant and at the same time give feedback. They can monitor the forecasting of the stages of the live plant, and at the same time give feedback of the current state of the plant. And this means that this will be very useful to validate the models and with the time. Already?
Yes.
Okay.
Imagine.
So we will have more accurate predictions at the end. Example of results, 3 scales of climate predictions to give the end users short, medium, and long-term strategies. For instance, warning extreme alerts that prevent them, for instance, from heat waves, hail, strong storms, and medium-term strategy that for decision on field, for crop planning, but also logistics. If they know with months or weeks ahead that they are gonna have a poor harvest, they can already start with the planification of buying must from other companies. We will also have the long-term strategy with decadal projections to forecast harvesting days for 2030, 40, and 50 to understand better the life cycle plant on the long term. So, and my last slide is devoted of some suggestions of how to deliver more efficient climate services in agriculture. As we all know, the agriculture sector is really conservative, so it's difficult to introduce new concepts. So, involvement of end user from the very beginning of the project is vital. From the design phase, really, to the validation of the service. Obvious for all sectors is to do a user-friendly tool, and it's going to be a learning process. So, be prepared to be hand by hand with the farmer in a teaching process, as Isadora has mentioned before. Create capacities so users can understand possibilities, because they will have to work with possibilities, and they have to be able to understand the results that we are providing. Farmers have to trust results, so increased accuracy of forecasting is in their wishing list. And at the end, from the point of view of the exploitation, climate service in agriculture. Since the small farmers may not be allowed to afford these types of tool, at least at this very initial stages, we have to point at farmers' associations or big companies, in our case, big wineries. And this is all. Thank you very much.
Okay. So thanks, Maria. You had 3 minutes more than the others, so the punishment will be 3 bottles of wine for us. So I would like to invite now Michele Bernardi, who is coming from Agro-Impact, and I hope he stays by the 5 minutes, but I was quite insistent yesterday with him.
Okay. Good morning to everybody. Let me use 10 seconds of this time to thank all the organizers and the participants and the staff involved in this very nice festival. I enjoy very much. I prepare a presentation, but I would like to focus on a very important point that for me are fundamental when I design and develop a climate service for agriculture. So, no, yes. So, of course, to resume, climate service for agriculture are defined as a decision-making support tool to transform climate information into relevant advisory services to provide tailored, salient, and usable advisories for farming communities based on available climate information. Of course, we have to very clear on how we go step by step in developing climate services. So we have the output, so are the climate service intervention, like a training or a new service access and use. Outcomes, which is a behavioral change, so are the change of farming practices, skill, knowledge, but also the impact. We have to measure the impact of climate services. So if this is a change on behavior in livelihood or resilience. Okay, I don't go much on this slide because what is the main requirement for a climate service, particularly for smallholder farmers. Of course, the information how they must be structured are important. So it must be downscale interpreted locally. It must include information about the growing season weather beyond the seasonal average. It must express accuracy and in transparent probabilistic terms, which sometimes are not very well understood. It must be interpreted in terms of agricultural impact and management implication. One important point is to reach the end user. And in many climate services, there's no enough attention to the last mile, how to reach really the farmers or the farming communities. And this is an important point to evaluate and to develop some measure. Here we have, I try to list the gaps in provision of localized climate information services, what are the gaps in climate information system, decision support system that are relevant to decision makers, and then what are the farm yield gaps and the role of climate services. These are very important in order to improve the production of the farming communities. But what I wanted to stress is the key prerequisite for a public information service to influence action. One is credibility, so perceived technical quality and authority of the information. Salience, which is a perceived relevance to the needs of decision makers. And third is a legitimacy, sorry, perception that the information service seeks the user interest. And finally, how to finance a climate service. And this is a very important point because many meteorological services, they don't have revenue enough to fund this sort of services. So now they are developing more and more the public-private partnership. For example, in Kenya, they are developing a PPP through the meteorological agency, IBM in order to develop an application to a smartphone. So it can be disseminated to, the target is 1 million farmers for the cost of 1 year, $1 per year to access the information to the farmers. Of course, there are some advantage and risk on the PPP, either for public authorities and also for the private partner. And these advantage and risk must be carefully evaluated when we design a climate service. Thank you.
Perfect. Very good, Michele. I think you can trade your half minute with Maria, and then we are in time. I would like to invite now Carmen Arguello from the FAO that took over.
Good morning, everyone. So since this is a storytelling, I'm going to start by saying once upon a time, there was a sector that was both one of the greatest contributors of greenhouse gas emissions according to NDCs that countries have presented, but was also one of the most affected and impacted sectors in the economies. I wanted to bring you this slide to summarize both the impacts and the contributions that the sector can bring. But this sector has a great potential to change, to update, and to bring many different updates to the sector. So what we expect from the future of agriculture? We expect that future farms will be small and smart. And these are some examples: the use of survey drones, the fleet agribots, the smart tractors, texting cows, and farming data could be all part of the dream of the new type of agriculture that could be developed. What is the challenge? The challenge is, and we have been talking about a lot, to make the climate services user-friendly, but how about making them also inclusive of the knowledge and the information that can be collected at the local level. So let's not depart from the fact that communities and farmers don't have this knowledge. Let's use this knowledge and link it with the science that all of you are working at, and like perfect a little bit more the climate services. So there's the triple divide. How do we make this information, the knowledge and the science digital? How do we make it reach the rural area? And how do we make sure that we're ensuring gender balance and gender equality when providing these climate services? And there are a lot of challenges that have been discussed during these days. So some of them are what should be the content of these climate services? How do we develop the capacities or strengthen the capacities? How do we ensure gender and diversity reflected in these climate services, so that this information is useful to women and other vulnerable groups who are usually making very fast decisions to ensure their livelihoods and so on. How do we ensure access and participations of very vulnerable and remote communities? How do we strengthen the partnerships and stop duplicating the work that we're doing, or stop doing things in parallel, as we were saying? And how do we improve the technologies and ensure that the processes are observant of the economic, social, and environmental safeguards as defined in the international community? So just some important conclusions from what I've heard in these days and from the information that FAO is developing constantly. But I will just focus on the last one. No technology alone or no climate service alone can provide or can solve all the problems in agriculture. But the right combination of different channels, processes, and tools that include digital innovations, biological improvement, and agroecology can make a development change. where it's most needed. And remembering the fact that it needs to be inclusive and consider the particular needs. So there is not one shoe that fits all the communities. So we have to think how to better address the needs of the Latin American communities, the African communities, because they're experiencing different challenges. So I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
So I would like to invite now our last speaker, Giannis, that is coming from the National Observatory of Athens.
Hello to all, thank you for the invitation. My name is Giannis Lemesios. I work in the Institute of Environmental Research and Sustainable Development of the National Observatory of Athens. I will try to present you a tool that we are constructing this period, the Adapt to Climate tool. It's implementing in the framework of the Life Adapt to Climate project that NOAA is coordinating. It's a decision support tool for adaptation to climate change impact on the Mediterranean island agriculture. Other partners of the project is the Technical University of Athens, the Institute of Biometeorology of the University of Florence, the Agricultural Institute of Research Institute of Cyprus. These are the scientific, let's say, partners, and also policymakers partners, also the Agricultural Research Institute and also the region of Crete and Sicily. Very quick, some details about the project. The overall aim of the Adapt to Climate project is to increase the knowledge of the vulnerability in the Mediterranean agriculture to climate change and to support decision-making for adaptation planning. As you can see, the project is implemented in 3 important Mediterranean islands, the Crete, the Cyprus, and the Sicily. It's very important islands in terms of the cultivation areas at the national level. In case of Crete and Sicily, and also agriculture is very important from Cyprus. And also, you can see the different crops we have studied in 3 different islands. For Cyprus, the olive trees, vineyards, wheat, barley, and potatoes. For Crete, olive trees, vineyard, and tomatoes. And from Sicily, vineyard and wheat. And also, we have also defined some pilot areas, let's say the most important cultivation areas in this island, where we carried out more detailed research, downscaled climatic formation, more detailed hydrological information, show more detailed vulnerability of the crops. These are the steps for the final vulnerability, and also all the information that the Adapt to Climate tool is provided to the user. First of all, the climatic and hydrological modeling, it's an input for the crop models. The output of the models, in combination with some socioeconomic indicators, assess the vulnerability. And then, after the evaluation of different adaptation options, we can reach the final vulnerability with adaptation. I will focus exactly in the climate and the crop modeling. For climate, we use different regional models. You can see the control period, the future period, and different RCPs that we used, the 4.5 and 8.5 scenarios. I think that this is important because, as you can see, after a collaboration with stakeholders, let's say the intended user, we have constructed tailor-made indicators, climatic indicators for the different crops, which somehow related to the crop development and growth. For example, you can see that the first indicator is related to the fruit development, the second to the flowering, and so on. Some information about the crops, you can see the model that we have used, the different scenarios, the climatic, the CO2 concentration, and also different scenarios about sowing and precocity. And finally, the important performance indicator of the crops about the yield, how the yield is going to change in the future, the flowering, the maturity, and also the potential evapotranspiration, the actual evapotranspiration, and the ratio of these two. So all this information is provided to the users through the web platform, so the visitor can take any information about the different methodologies that we have used. And also, for visualization purposes, we have also constructed a WebGIS platform. As you can see, it's very similar to a GIS program. In the left side, we have different indicators as a layer, and the user can select and visualize the result as a map. We try to construct an interactive tool, let's say. So this platform has many options. One of these is the Identify tool, where someone can choose in the left many indicators, can click in every point in the map, and on the right side have a summary, let's say, for the value of all these indicators. And finally, the Swipe tool, where you can choose an indicator, let's say the historic period, and then the same indicator for the future. You can swipe from right to left and see the differences of this indicator. Thank you very much. As I said, this is under construction. You can visit the official URL and learn more information about this project, about the tool. Thank you very much.
So, thanks to everyone. We have had very nice and very diverse presentations. We had Ludwig showing us the climate risk management system, looking at actually how to analyze the risk of the investments and to make sure that those investments are viable into the future. He's asking the community of Climate Europe also to support this system and to enhance this system to make it more stable, more consistent, and supporting, so to say, not only the activities of the bank, but also the activities of the projects that are going to implement using this knowledge. Then we had Carmen going more into detail on climate services for wine, and explaining us why climate services are needed, and saying that, well, one of the main, as far as I understood, one of the main concerns is to validate the adaptation strategies. We are looking at in the long term. So how can we validate decisions that we make today to adapt to climate change into the future? How can we help with our climate services to support this with the integration of data, but also, once we have done that, looking at what is the feedback of the users. Are they really using what we are producing, and how can we adapt it so that the uptake of what we are doing increases? We have had then Michele giving us a presentation, putting very clear where climate services might make sense, looking at what are the outputs of the climate services, looking at where the intervention of the climate services should be, looking at the outcomes. Are climate services really making a change? The behavior of people is changing due to the more information, and which is the impact of those climate services. And he was also pointing out at the last slide the finances of climate services, and I think this is a very important thing. It goes hand in hand with Ludwig. Finances of the climate services at the end of the day are very important. So who is going to pay for them? How we're going to make them, so to say, sustainable in time? Not only as products of a project, but also of something that should stay longer there for the users. We had then Carmen that brought from the FAO more this global perspective, looking at and telling to us that we need to produce climate services, but at the end of the day, what it makes sense is to have the right combination of science, non-science, soft and hard tools, and all together to make agriculture sustainable, and in both terms, in adapting to climate change, but also in reducing CO2 emissions. And she pointed out twice the gender aspect. We didn't have this here. I haven't heard it that much in the 3 days that we have been here, but I think this is very, very important when it comes to delivering knowledge to the right people, because some cases the knowledge just stayed at the so to say, men level, and it doesn't reach the women level, who are the ones really working in the agricultural sector, mostly in most of the countries around the world. And we had then a last presentation of Giannis that was presenting us then a tool, a decision support tool for these 3 particular islands, 4 particular agricultural crops, and mainly to look at the potential future vulnerability of these crops, giving visualization to the users. I think visualization tools are very, very important, are easier to understand as many words. No one picture says more than many words. We say it in Spanish. So I think it's said in many, many different languages as well. So I think it has been a variety of presentations giving us hints about what do they need from us, from the climate services community. And now I would like to open the floor for discussions and questions and suggestions, how to go forward, how to answer the questions that they put to the community. So please, you have to. So the floor is yours, public. I cannot imagine that you have questions. So everything was very clear. Nobody has questions. You must have some questions, or at least some remarks, or if not, I will go through every one of you that I know that could potentially say something.
Thank you very much. Question to the island agricultural software. Looked really, really great. My question is, who are the users? I don't imagine that the local Cypriot farmer can use this. Is this the ministry, or is who helps the farmer take those decisions? Or is this really simple enough that the farmer can just plot in whatever he's doing and says, okay, I'm harvesting 2 weeks earlier this year?
Thank you for your question. We have in mind to separate the tool for, let's say, not very scientific crew, but also from farmers, as you say, where we provide the information more simply. I think that it's important for farmers to know what will happen in the future. But I think that this tool is more appropriate for policy makers, for the regions, as you see in my presentations, where they construct the adaptation strategy and will implement the future adaptation measures. I think that for those is this information that we are provide.
Someone else? Yeah.
Thank you. A question for Carmen. You referred a triple divide that you were addressing in terms of digital, rural, and gender. Can you please develop a little bit more the concept of how you are going to address those 3 divides in an integrated way? How you plan to get access to to the digitalization of tools and actually management in a rural world, and at the same time getting equitative access for both genders?
Well, but that is exactly the challenge. How do we make the available information, the best available information, and there I would like to emphasize what I said, not only the science-based information, but also the knowledge that the communities already have. So these communities have been observing climate for decades, and they have ancestral and indigenous knowledge that needs to be considered. So how do we make all of that knowledge, scientific and non-scientific, together, digitalized? How do we make this digitalization reach the rural areas where there's mostly just cell phones and maybe, I don't know, TVs? How do we make this information And I think that's important to link with the presentation from Isadora. How do we deliver the message of this digitalization to the rural area? And then within the rural area, there's a lot of disparities. And how do we ensure that women who are usually in charge of the household in developing countries, how do we ensure that they are accessing this information as well? Usually when we think about climate services, we think about users, the decision makers, the government institutions who are going to make decisions for the country. I think that we need to let that go a little bit down and think about those communities and think about the people who are making the decisions at another level, right? Who are usually women who need to keep their household together and need to make decisions to ensure that there's not going to be losses in their in their crops and so on. So how do we make that happen? It's the main challenge. And I think there is a lot of information that is going down. We're downstreaming the information in different ways. I think that the international community, and I'm going to refer particularly to the Green Climate Fund because it's the experience that I have more fresh, is very interested in having this this type of tools reaching out to the rural areas that are more vulnerable and to women. And for example, the Readiness and Preparatory Support program of the Green Climate Fund provides resources, $1 million a year per country, to foster this type of multi-stakeholder engagement on climate finance and on climate services. So it's important to keep in mind the process that I mentioned about how do we make this the more inclusive that we can. And there are tools, there are resources available, and that's what we're trying to do right now. And I will welcome any thoughts from the scientific community on how to do that.
Thank you. Yes, so you are proposing more of a bottom-up approach, creating conditions for bottom-up initiatives to,
yes,
to actually thrive and meet top-down policy. In that case, and especially because we are addressing rural areas with digital technology, there may be a fourth divide, which is an age divide. Right? Have you thought of that? Have you considered?
No, I hadn't thought of that, but you're totally right. I mean, from my experience with my mom, teaching her just how to use Facebook, it's a challenge, and we need to also address that age challenge and how to approach the elderly in the way they are also making decisions.
Some other questions from the public?
It's maybe not a question, but more a remark or a point for discussion. What I also see in several of the presentation is that the importance of reaching the user and the communication. And as Isadora also said, it's really a challenge to reach the user. And I do not know why, but I also experience myself very often that the effort needed for reaching the user to get in contact is heavily underestimated. And maybe that's due to the fact that the communication is often not seen as science. But it really is. And if you look for information, then you can find, well, a lot of information about what can help you in communication. And well, later on I found a lot of information about my own experience, things that I learned by trial and error, and then I could put it into context. But I hope we can exchange that knowledge also, that that everyone can reach the users more easily. And then also what's important is that the users also sometimes, not always, but sometimes need to put a little bit more effort in understanding also the the climate science or the adaptation researchers. And then if you have willingness from two sides, you can really reach something.
Thanks for a comment. Would you like to say something about it?
Yeah, thank you. I think this question is really critical, and in our daily job, together with my colleague Rasmus and our other climate change mitigation or adaptation specialists, we are facing that very regularly. Not as far as last week, we, for example, received from a promoter, I will not say who and which country, but an attempt for a climate risk vulnerability analysis for a large project in the agriculture field. And we could clearly see that not enough capacity building had been done for this promoter. He or she, this promoter, did not understand really what was a CRVA, what was expected in terms of climate data, in terms of precisions, in terms of defining adaptation options. So that's a big challenge. And big part of our work in the agriculture area is to lend to local banks, so to financial intermediaries through what we call credit lines. And if we want to ensure that the portfolio for this financial intermediary is really contributing to adaptation or to mitigation, there is a lot of capacity building to be done of these stakeholders. So now we are reacting on this. One of our colleagues is now developing a sort of a technical assistance facility to support this small or these local banks, these financial intermediaries, to be able to face with good CRVA, with good climate informed decisions for their portfolio. So thank you for this remark.
Does anyone else have additional comments or questions? Yeah.
Thank you for your presentations, and building on the comment of Jeanette. Indeed, one of the challenges, also given the very nice first presentation we had opening this morning, the reaching the user. But there can be also users in a chain. Often a climate service is not generated in one strike from some data crunching to a farmer. Often it's not working that way. And that may also mean, so this is indeed really important and really true, and I also think this is really one of the problems that has to be addressed. But it may not always be handy to all the time kick only the climate modelers about that, because they may be not the most best positioned persons to do that. You may need intermediate actors to do that, and rather have another way of organizing the communication. In fact, it may in the end be more effective in trying to build the whole line in one way. But that depends, of course, also on the sector. And I wonder for the examples that we heard here. So what is your experience in this whole chain of actors involved? Was it better to do it in one way, or was it better to hand it over to the next? And then, can you say something about that? Do you get what I asked?
I didn't exactly understand the question. It's about the climate models and
No, I think it's about how the users are able to reach the knowledge.
My point was also building on the comment of Jeanette just, that so we all acknowledge that this accounting for the user is important, but the climate service is not generated in one time from global circulation models to advising a farmer what to plant on an island in the Aegean Sea. There is a lot of steps in between. And sort of that also may mean that this addressing of the user, you can segment that. It may mean that you have intermediate, for example, an agronomic expertise institute or so that is handling these things, and it's better for the modeler to talk with this agronomic expertise institute than directly talking with the farmers, because that may not work. So how this communication down the value chain, so to speak, is organized, what are your experiences with it? With what kind of actors have you been? No, but let's say also that to make it say it another way. With what kind of actors have you been talking when you were devising the climate service?
For climate models, to be accurate, we also used observations, but about the outputs, we have also the regions there. We are local people who maybe can reach farmers and interested people better for, you know, the scientific community. Models are implement predictions, and I think that it's important. And also policy makers can transmit this information to farmers, I think, if I understand the question. But
anyone else want to answer? Well, I think I can say something, even though I'm not in there. I have been hearing several things from all of you this morning, and I think in terms of knowledge transfer and in terms of capacity development, we need to do it both sides. I think the climate services providers also need capacity development to be able to communicate to the users, because they have not studied, you said, no, that communication is a science as well. They have not studied science. They have not studied economy, so they should stop claiming they can communicate and can make economic analysis, for example, just to give you an example. They are good in climate sciences. They are good in meteorology. But there are a lot of steps in between that they don't know. So we need a combination, an interdisciplinary combination of people to make a climate service viable and easy accessible for the users. And on the other side, yes, the users need to be built, so they need to understand probabilities, they need to understand many other things. But it's the combination, it's the transdisciplinary approach, is what Carmen was saying as well. It's the combination on formal and non-formal education that should come in place when we are developing climate services. And it's only going to work this way. And as you said, as you mentioned, Adrian, we need any kind of, in the value chain of climate services production, any kind of users and producers collaborating, so that at the end of the day, we are able to do as Apple, to bring tablets into the market, even though nobody wanted to use them in the first place. So to bring a product into the market that at the end of the day is going to be used, because the people see the value on that. But for doing so, you need all of this back and forth, including formal and non-formal knowledge, etc. So, do you want to say any word at the end before we go to the coffee break? Anybody?
I would like just to add a comment to what Jeanette just said, and adding also to something that Isadora mentioned, which I think it's really important. The decision deadlines that people are faced when they need to take into consideration climate services do differ a lot according to the level of responsibility the person is taking. And Isadora mentioned a very important concept that I haven't seen considered so far in this type of discussions, which is a structure of trust within the organization. Because a CEO is not going ever to assess if a specific service, a specific information from a service is credible or not. He will have someone to do that. He'll never have the time to do that. But that means that he has to trust the person doing it. Okay? So the person who is doing it, on the other hand, who may be a director or a manager, will probably have someone with climate knowledge who will be actually interacting with the climate service provider. And this director or manager will also have to trust that person doing that job, who in turn has to trust the provider. Okay, so we are not just speaking of trust here as an immaterial concept, but it's rather a very important feature of the whole organization. Because it is only when this structure of trust permeates the different levels of organization that you have a climate service deploying the full value that it can deliver. That was.
So thanks a lot. I think this was a very nice closure for this session on climate services for the agricultural sector, which I think what we were saying was applicable to any other sector as well. So now I would like to invite everyone to the coffee break, and thanks a lot to our panelists and to the interesting insights.